Every time I come out to the pool section here at Morongo, it kind of makes me wish I was here to swim instead of gamble, but alas, this is a poker vlog. First of all, Happy New Year to everyone out there. I haven't seen you guys since 2020. This is the first video of 2021. I hope you guys had a great end of the year. It was a pretty rocky one. Personally, I actually had a fantastic year, but it doesn't feel right to sort of brag about that when most people had a pretty rough one. So let's just move on to this new year, which so far has actually been the opposite. I think I've played poker like maybe 5 times and I'm down like $1,000 total over those 5 sessions. Hopefully today we can reverse that trend, and what better way to do that than with splash pots. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with splash pots, all it is a promotion instilled by the casino in which, for whatever reason, they splash the pot with money, and whoever wins the following hand wins that money. In this case, it's the football games that are happening today and tomorrow, which are as listed. These should be pretty high scoring games, which is great because the structure is as follows. A field goal is $50, a touchdown is $100, and a safety is $300, although obviously those rarely happen. Now, I could go on and on about why splash pots are awesome, but I'm sure it's pretty obvious. There's more money on the table, there's more pots to fight for, and on top of that, I feel like most people don't adjust accordingly to the dead money out there. Probably myself included most of the time, but you guys know I like to have a good time with the bomb pots, the straddles, and in this case, the splash pots. So hopefully all of those are in effect today. Now, if I get crushed, the silver lining, as always, is that I'll get it on video. Somehow, every time I turn the camera on, I seem to run good and win, which paints this picture that I never lose. Trust me, guys, that's not the case whatsoever. So whatever happens today should be good material for one reason or the other. Anyway, that's enough talk. You guys didn't come here to hear me blabber. You want to see some poker hands, so let's head inside and hop in a 5-10 game. All right, we are back underway here at the Morongo 510 once again. And in the first hand of No, I put on the straddle for $20. There's a middle position open to 45. The button makes the call, and I look down at ace king. I decide to raise it up to $220. The initial raiser calls, and the button folds. So we go heads up to a flop of ace 10-3 with 2 clubs. A very good start to the session, you could say. Now, typically this is a board where I could bet all my holdings for a small size, but the stacks are kind of weird here. He's only got around 1,000 or 1,100 behind, so I decide to opt for a bigger sizing this time to try to set up an all-in by the turn, seeing as I don't expect him to fold top pair, and also there's a lot of draws that obviously we can't really get value from on the river. So for all those reasons, I size up to $285. And my opponent makes the call, so already a decent-sized pot brewing here. We're off to a turn card, which is the deuce of diamonds. Looks pretty innocent to me, so I'm just going to stick with the plan of trying to get all the money in. He's got around $900 behind, so I move all in, and my opponent goes in the tank, which is always nice. Don't really want to hear a snap call in this situation, but definitely want to call nonetheless. Unfortunately, though, after thinking for a bit, he decides on a fold. Still a good start to the day. In the second interesting hand, we got our first splash pot of the day. This one for $100 since there was a touchdown in one of the games. And I looked down at pocket queens in early position. I raised it up to $80, but to be completely honest, I'm not sure what sizing I should be opening to with the $100 chip in the middle. Anyway, I decide on just 80. The button makes the call and the small blind makes the call as well. So we're going to go 3 ways to an amazing looking flop of Queen 7-4 rainbow. The small blind checks it over to me, and as you guys probably know by now, I typically advocate for fast playing strong hands, but on this exact board texture, it's kind of hard to get a lot of value since we block all the top pairs and there's not a lot of draws. So I decided to mix it up this time and check it, see what the button does. Unfortunately, the button checks it back. Turn card's the ace of spades, Seems reasonable that my opponents could have a hand like ace-jack or ace-10 that turns top pair. So when the small blind checks it over to me, now I decide to go for some value. There's also a flush draw out there, but it seems a little bit irrelevant, especially since we have the queen of spades. Anyway, I make it $300, the button makes the fold, and the small blind makes the call. Now, this player and I in particular have a bit of a history where he's caught me bluffing quite a few times, so I'm planning on going fairly large on the river since I don't expect him to fold an ace. And when the river comes off the 6 of hearts, I feel like that's a perfectly good card to do just that. So when he checks it over to me for a third time, I put in a bet to the tune of $1,090. Kind of a random amount, but seemed like a good choice at the time. He thinks about it for a while, and unfortunately, after a few minutes, he lets it go. Already twice in this session where we've had some strong hands and end up getting folds from our opponent. That's alright though, can't complain about running good and having these value spots already so early on. Now this next hand I'm going to go over happened 5 hours after the pocket queen's hand. That's right, 5 hours. I was extremely card dead, and the few times I did get some playable hands, everyone just folded. So after sitting around for 5 hours, we finally have something semi-interesting happen. The straddle is on in this hand, and we see a limp from an early position player. I raise it up to $80 with pocket jacks on the button. Both the straddler and the limper make the call, so we're going to go 3 ways in position here to a flop of 8-6-4 rainbow. Interestingly enough, the straddle leads for, I think it was like $80 or $75 to be honest, I'm not really sure. He's only got around $400 behind, so when the early position player folds, I think it's best to just get it in here. Typically, I would be flatting with pretty much all my holdings in this spot if there was like a lot of money left to play for, but with such small stacks, I think it's best to just get it in here. That's what I do. My opponent thinks about it for a while and ends up making the call. So far, so good, it seems to me. Turn card is the 6 of hearts, and the river is the 3 of hearts. I show it, and we beat Queen 8 of diamonds. So not the most interesting hand in the world, but like I said, after a bunch of hours of not really playing any hands, seems pretty damn exciting to me. Well, as you guys can probably tell, this is the next day because last night I was pretty exhausted and didn't really feel like filming an outro. And I figured since I'll be filming both Saturday and Sunday, I'll just touch base with you guys today. About last night, I was pretty card dead most of the day. Not really any interesting spots except for the 3 hands that I showed you guys. And even those were like pretty boring in my opinion. Sorry if you watched all the way through those, but just reporting the night as it happens to you guys. But today's a new day, and maybe things will be a bit different. Without any further ado, I'm going to drive back to the casino and jump into that 5-10 game. Let's go. All right, so back at it here for day 2 of these splash pots, and we're going to start things off getting pocket 10s all in versus a short stack who had pocket jacks. Typically not a good situation, and in this case it's no different since we lose this one. So we add some more money to our stack and upgrade to pocket kings in this next hand in the straddle of all places. We see 2 limpers before I raise it up to $100. Both of the limpers make the call, so 3 ways here to a flop of 6-3 deuce with 2 clubs. This time I decide to check it over to my opponents because I feel like they're the type to bet too frequently once checked to. And I guess it's also good to have some strong hands in your checking range, or so they say, something like that. Anyway, the first limper puts out a bet of $200. The player behind him folds, and when the action's back to me, it's a question of calling or putting in the check raise. He's only got around $600 behind, so I think the best play is to just get it in and commit him with all his overpairs that we beat or all the available draws that are on the board. So that's what I do. I move in for his remaining $600. We should be in pretty good shape aside from sets, obviously. He thinks it over for about a minute, but eventually decides on a call. Turn card's the 8 of clubs. Doesn't seem that great, but the river's a jack of clubs, so we end up with the second nuts here. I flip it over, but unfortunately we're going to lose this one to ace-9 of clubs. You know what's crazy? The burn card was the queen of clubs, as you can see right here. I mean, how many damn clubs are in this deck? Anyway, at this point, I move over to a different table with some friendlier faces, and what better way to get redemption than pick up pocket kings once again. Very similar to the last hand, there's 2 limpers, and I make it $100. The only difference is this time I'm in the big blind instead of the straddle. Now the straddle makes the call, and the first limper makes the call, but the second limper folds. Again, similar to the last hand, we're going to go 3 ways out of position to a flop of 4-4 deuce with 2 hearts. Once again, I check it, and I'm happy to see the straddle puts in a bet to the tune of $375. Pretty large bet. The early position player folds, and there's nothing to do here but continue with a call, I think, since there's a lot more money behind this time, unlike the last hand. I think he's got like 1,500 or 1,400 behind. So I proceed with a call and hope to hit a clean turn card, which is mostly what we get. It's the 10 of diamonds. Occasionally, my opponent could turn a boat on this card since I put him on a lot of pocket pairs like 8s through jacks. But once I check it to him and he moves all in for 13 or 1,400, seems pretty unlikely that he would play pocket 10s this way. And even if he did have pocket 10s, we're just going to pay this man his money. So I put in the call. River comes off the 5 of spades, and good news is we're up against pocket queens. So a bit of a cooler, but happy to be on the right end of it, and we scoop a fairly large pot here after getting smacked around a little in the first few hands. This next hand is quite a doozy. I started filming on the turn because I pick up 9-8 offsuit in the straddle and just decided to check my option once the small blind and big blind limp. Now things got interesting when the flop came out 10-7-6 all clubs. So we flopped the nut straight with technically a straight flush draw if you want to be optimistic. The small blind bets out for $50. The big blind calls 50. I decided to raise it to 175. The small blind folds and the big blind makes the call. So we're going to go heads up here to a turn card, which is the deuce of diamonds. He checks it, and I think this is a good spot to bet fairly large. There's so many worse hands that are going to continue here, such as 2 pairs, maybe even sets, and all the combinations of ace of clubs with some other card. So I put in a bet of $500, and my opponent thinks and thinks before deciding to make the call. So fairly big pot brewing here, hoping for a clean river, and that's exactly what we get in the 3 of spades. And as I'm trying to think of how much I'll bet once he checks it to me, I realize we don't even get the option because he actually leads out for $600 on this card. This is a pretty annoying spot. It seems very obvious at this point that he's got a flush. I guess in some cases he could be block betting with a worse hand such as 2 pairs or maybe a set, but it seems more likely that he would just check those hands and try to get to showdown. At the same time though, we're getting a fairly good price. He didn't even bet half pot. I don't know. As usual, when a decision's pretty close, or so I think it is, I decide to flick in the call. I want to see what's going on. And what's going on is our opponent's got king, queen of clubs. Pretty nasty flop. Seems like a cooler. Looking back, I guess I could fold a river, but tight folds aren't really my forte. So anyway, right when things were going better with that big pocket kings versus queens hand, we lose a pretty big one here. Similar to the last hand, I started filming this one on the flop because it didn't seem like anything too exciting would happen when there was a few limpers and I looked down at 7 deuce in the big blind. I check my option and we go to a flop of queen 7 deuce. So there's one way to make that hand interesting. The small blind checks, I check it, and I'm happy to see the early position player puts out a bet of $30. Action folds all the way back to me. I check raise to $130. There's plenty of draws I could balance this with, so certainly going to do it with 2 pairs. Anyway, the early position player makes the call, so we're off to a turn card here, which is the 8 of hearts. Shouldn't really change much, I think, so I'm just going to keep barreling for value. I put out a bet of $330. My opponent in this case had been losing quite a bit and has also seen me show a few bluffs in the past, so I feel like I'm not going to get much credit for a hand here and therefore could size up pretty big. Seems to be the case because he doesn't think any longer than 5 seconds before making the call. Hoping for a clean river, and the 5 of spades definitely qualifies. Now, the question is, do we want to check and let him bluff with missed draws? Obviously, there's king, queen, queen, jack, queen 10, hands like that, but aside from those exact holdings, it seems to me he's likely to have a draw that missed. Now, that being said, I feel like most players don't really bluff the river as often as they should. And given the way I played the hand, it doesn't really look like I'm going to fold at this point anyway, so it seems kind of optimistic to check and hope that he bluffs. For that reason, I'm not super happy with this, but I actually did end up checking in this case, and sadly he checks it back right away, so at that point it does seem clear that he had a queen, and when I show the 7 deuce, indeed he just mucks it. So it does seem like we missed out on some potential value from top pair, but that's also being pretty results oriented. Now in the last hand of the night is definitely a head scratcher. I'll leave it at that. Anyway, the straddle's on in this one. There's an under the gun open to $60. I'm next to act with ace jack of clubs. I kick it up to $180, folds all the way back to the under the gun player, and she makes the call. So we're going to go heads up here to a flop of 10-9-4 with 2 clubs. She checks it over to me. I bet 1/3 the size of the pot. In this case, I think 130. And she makes the call. So we're off to a turn card here, which is the king of diamonds, a very good card. But this is actually where the hand gets fairly interesting when my opponent decides to lead for $225. I'm not really sure what she's up to here. I guess it could be possible that she peeled the flop with ace king high or maybe king queen, picks up top pair on the turn and just decides to bet. I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure what she's got here. Raising doesn't seem too great. Folding's out of the question now that we pick up an inside straight draw. So that just leaves one option. I make the call. So we're off to a river card here, which comes the 4 of diamonds, pairing the board and obviously not improving us whatsoever. Now she decides to check it and we have a decision on our hands. Seems to me like most of the time ace jack high is not going to win here. What seems more likely to me is that she's got a king. And from my experience, people don't really bet turns just to check fold on rivers. Seems a lot more likely that she's checking this river card with the intentions of calling a bet. So after pondering it over for a little bit, I decided this is not the best run out to put in the bluff. Although looking back, I'm not sure if that's correct. I feel like moving all in here can't be that bad since this board is so much better for us than for her. But like I said, I didn't think she was going to fold for a $900 all in. So I just check it back and guess what we end up losing to? Well, you'll never guess it, but it was pocket 8s. Yeah, pretty frustrating hand to say the least. Sucks to end the night on this note because it seems like we could have won that hand very easily, but obviously we only know that once we see her exact holding. So not the most pleasant day of poker. Never really won any huge pots aside from the pocket kings versus pocket queens, but that was immediately followed up by flopping a straight versus a flush. Anyway, after the last football game of the night came to a close, I decided to rack up and call it a night. I ended up losing like $500 or $600, which is unfortunate, but really not that big a deal when you consider just how big the 5-10 play is, especially when the straddle's on and the splash pots and all that. But between the 2 days, still book a pretty nice profit. Moving on, I think at the end of this month or maybe the start of next month, I'll be visiting Las Vegas for like 2 nights, maybe 3 nights, just to play some poker and get some more footage for the channel. So for those of you who play poker on the regular in Las Vegas, shoot me a message on Instagram right here if you want to meet up or maybe exchange some chips over a poker table or whatever. Oh, also, at some point in the next couple of months, I'm going to be heading over to the East Coast as well as the Midwest, maybe back to Texas. I don't know. I'm getting a little burnt out with the usual routine here at Morongo. I love the place, but a change of scenery is always good. And I'd love to get some fresh material for the vlog instead of like always reporting back from the same place. I feel like that gets pretty stale. So that's all I have to report for right now. Those are the upcoming trips. And that's a wrap for today. If you made it this far, thanks so much for watching. As always, I appreciate all you guys' support. And hopefully we have another good year here on this channel for 2021. If you like this video, leave a thumbs up. I really appreciate it, and it helps the channel continue to grow. And that's it for today, guys. As always, good luck at the tables. I'll see you all next time. Peace.